Good day, everyone. Good day, sir. Today I will report about the chapter 8, the gunshot residue, and the chapter 9, the explosive and explosion. The chapter 8, the gunshot residue. Basically, gunshot residues comes from the powder component of bullet, elements from cartridge cases and gun barrel, where the bullet passes. When these components are burned, certain products of combustions are formed, which includes partially burned and unburned particles. These particles are deposited on the target with definite pattern depending upon the distance between the muzzle of the gun and the target at the time of discharge. Upon discharge of this firearm, gunpowder residues may deposit on a person's at close proximity, so the interpretations as to how discharge the firearm should be made with cautions. Hand or body parts close to the fired weapon may have the gunpowder residues consisting with having discharged. The weapon, however, absence of gunpowder residues of the person's hands or body parts does not mean that he or she did not discharge a firearm. Gunpowder residues may be found on the skin or clothing of the persons who discharged the gun, on the entrance bullet hole of the garment of one of the victim, or on other target materials at the scene. These are the components of gun residue. These are the components of gunshot residue. First is primer or lead residue. The second is gunpowder residues. And third is elemental component from cartridge cases residues. The composition of primer. The primer elements may be easier to detect in residues because they do not get as hot as that of powder. The first is major primer elemental composition. These are the lead, barium, or antimony. And the second is trace elements. These are aluminum, sulfur, tin, calcium, potassium, chlorine, or silicon. And the third is inorganic compound. R. Mercury fulminates, or that presents in most ammunitions manufactured in Eastern Europe and used in Middle East. In addition, these residues gradually adhere to the discharged bullets. Thus, primer residues can be found in the target of wounds at considerable distance from the muzzle, up to 200 meters. So these are the compositions of gunpowder. What are the compositions of gunpowder? First is contains up to 23 organic compound. The second is nitrocellulose is virtually always present along with nitrate and nitrogen containing compound such as diphenylamine or PDA. And these are the types of gunpowder. The types of gunpowders are single base, double base, triple base. First is single based. Single based when the basic ingredients is nitrocellulose. The second is double base. Nitrocellulose plus 1 to 40% nitroglycerin. And the triple base is nitrocellulose plus nitroglycerin plus nitroguanidine. This can be differentiated using a mass spectrophotometer. These are the compositions of cartridge cases, bullets, coating, and metal jacket. First is cartridge and primary cases, or these are brass, copper, zinc, bullet cores. These are lead, antimony, and few iron alloy. The third is bullet jackets. These are brass or copper, zinc. Some are iron or aluminum alloy, such as contain nickel. The gunshot residue examinations. The gunshot residue examinations are performed to help the investigators in determining whether a person has discharged a firearm or not, whether a firearm was discharged or not, and the possible gunshot range of the distance of the shooter to the victim. Both hands of the suspect as well as those of the victim, the firearm, and the clothing of the victim must be examined to determine the presence of gunpowder nitrates. The types powder used in ammunition of small firearms. These are the two types of powder used in ammunition of small firearms. First is the black powder. Black powder, this contains a mixture of carbon or charcoal, sulfur, and potassium nitrate. This mixture is used as an igniter in smokeless gun propellant. It consists of mixtures of 15% charcoal, 10% sulfur, and 75% potassium nitrates. Aluminum is added to enhance the burning property. When this powder is burned, combustion reactions takes place. And the second is the smokeless powder. These mixtures consist of cellulose or glycerol nitrates combined with some stabilizers, such as nitrobenzene or graphite nitrates, dichromate, and oxalates. When this powder explodes, the chemical reactions takes place. Primers. To explode a low explosives flames is required. In guns, the flames is applied by means of a primer. Primer produces flame on percussions. Typically, primer consists of a case containing an initiating explosive such as mercury, fulminate, and oxidizing agents such as potassium chlorate or barium nitrate, and a fuel such as antimony sulfide. This component is the basis for examinations of gunshot residues, but particularly primer residues for distance determinations. Detections of gunshot residue. These are the following are common methods used by most crime laboratories to detect gunshot residues. First is paraffin test. Second is lead residue. Detections limit up to 30 feet and always present on the opposite sides of the penetrated target. Reported from immediately glass target is present. The third is gunpowder residue examinations. Detections limit highly variable up to 20 cm and up to 21 inches is common. The fourth is other examinations. These are the following are common. The last two methods are classical. Color development of modern methods such as Newton activations analysis or NAA. Atomic absorption spectrophotometry or EAS. Scanning electrons microscopy with energy depressive analysis. And inductive coupled plasma with mass spectrophotometry are used. History of paraffin test or dermal nitrates or the phenylamine test. Paraffin test was originated from Cuba when Dr. Gonzalo Itorios first used paraffin for collecting gunpowder residues from discharged firearm. In 1933, Teodoro Gonzalez of Criminal Identifications Laboratory, Mexico City introduced the test in the United States. In this test, the hands were created with a layer of melted paraffin. After cooling, the cast were removed and treated with diphenylamine. The methods of examinations. Paraffin test. To determine a person has discharged a firearm or the paraffin diphenylamine test is used. The basis of this test of the presence of nitrates in the gunpowder residues when a warm melted paraffin wax is applied on the hands of a lead shooter. It will cause the pores of the skin to open, exude the particles of the gunpowder residue. These particles of gunpowder residues are being extracted by paraffin cast. With the use of melted paraffin wax and will appear as blue specks when the phenylamine resin is added on the cast. It must be noted that the specks are generally located on the area of the thumb and forefingers. What is the principles behind the paraffin test? While the burned and partially burned particles is deposits on the target and in the barrel of the gun. Some of these burned and partially burned particles may escape around the breeze of the gun and some may be embedded of the exposed surface of the hand or of the persons discharging the firearm. Thus, the presence of these residues can be detected by the way of paraffin examinations. As a rule in the paraffin examinations, the forensic chemist or chemical officer should personally conduct the paraffin casting and on the alien shooter. However, a component laboratory technicians under the supervision of the examiner on case may also perform the paraffin casting. But it is the forensic chemist or chemical officers who should examine the paraffin cast taken from both hands of the allied shooter is to determine the presence of gunpowder nitrates. Paraffin casting of allied shooter should only be done within 72 hours from the time of the allied shooting incident. No person shall be subjected to paraffin casting after the lapse of the specified period. Embalmed cadaver who allegedly discharged a firearm shall no longer be subjected to paraffin examination because of the impossibility of extracting the gunpowder nitrates from the former's hands. Paraffin wax. Paraffin wax is a white, translucent, tasteless, odorless solid consisting of mixtures of solid hydrocarbons of high molecular weight. It is the insoluble in water and acids and soluble in benzene, ligroin, worm, alcohol, chloroform, turpentine, carbon disulfide, and olive oil. Combustible auto-ignition temperatures. The melted paraffin wax penetrates the minutes crevice of the skin upon applications, thus adhering if there are particles present. When the casts are filled, the burned and partially burned particles are extracted. A person firing a gun will likely have the particles located above the thumb and forefinger, since these are the surfaces exposed to the gun. What should be noted in the interpretations of results? Time of reactions. First is number and characteristics of blue and minute speaks, and locations and third characters of the blue speaks, and then distributions and locations. The different names of this test are Langes test, diphenylamine test, dermal nitrate test, Gonzalez test. Gonzalez test, named after the one who improved the test. And questions. Is there any means of removing these nitrates from the hands? The hands? How long will these stay in the pores? And the answer is none. Ordinarily, washing will not remove the nitrates from the pores of the skin. Usually, gunpowder nitrates that are embedded on the skin stay for 72 hours. That is why paraffin casting should be conducted within the special period. These are the substances giving false positive result. First, fertilizer, explosives, tobacco, urine, certain cosmetics, and food samples. And then the cigarettes. Will these substances not give positive results for paraffin test? If the hand of the subject's persons are contaminated with nitrates other than from gunpowder, one will expect to find smuds, or just a smear of blue color and conglomerations of blue specks. But nitrates from gunpowder appear as blue specks with tailings, because these particles were embedded into the hands with force. Is paraffin test results a conclusive evidence? Why? No. It is just a corroborative evidence which intends to support the testimony of eyewitness. These are instances wherein the persons who actually discharged firearms would still give the negative results to the paraffin test because of the several factors. What are these factors? The factors are types of caliber ammunitions, use of gloves, length of the barrel, Age of the gun or efficiency of mechanism. The directions of firing. Wind directions and velocity. Humidity or percentage moistures in air. And when 72 hours had already lapsed. Types of caliber of ammunitions. A hand discharging a revolver is more likely to give positive result of gunpowder nitrates compared to that of a hand of discharging a pistol and an automatic pistol. The chamber is an integral part of the barrel, whereas in the revolver of the chamber is located the cylinder separated from the barrel with air space. Thus, leakage of the powder is the revolver is more likely to occur. False positive results are contaminations of transfer of gunshots. First is contaminations of gun or transfer of gunshots residues to the body by mishandling or when the body is heavily contaminated by GSR from previous shooting. And the second is washing of hands. Samples are collected. The third is type of ammunition such as rifle and gunshot and shotgun. Length of barrel. A weapon of 2 inches barrel will deposit residues over larger area than a weapon of 5-inch barrel. In a longer barrel, the hands is farther away from the muzzle and end of the gun. It takes the bullets to travel in more time, thus using up or burning up more if not all of the nitrates. In a short barrel, the bullet travels through the barrel in less time, having behind a greater amount of unburned particles. Age of the gun or efficiency of mechanisms. Complete combustions or the conversions of all nitrates into its end products is more likely to occur in a few weapons compared to an old one. Besides, leakage of the gunpowder is more likely to happen in the old weapon, where the breech mechanisms is no longer tightly tightened. Directions of firing. More powder residues will be obtained when the gun is discharged pointing upward than downward. Gunpowder residues have weight and will naturally fall down because of gravity. Wind directions and velocity. In high velocities, the powder residues will be blown in the directions of the wind. One is more likely to be positive for gunpowder nitrates if there is no wind or the wind direction is towards the shooter. Humidity or percentage moistures on air. Humidity lessens the extent of combustions, yielding more gunpowder nitrates. False positive reactions. False positive reactions is mere of blue color of a conglomerations of blue specks on both dorsal and palm aspects of the hands. Gunpowder residues test on firing. The dephenilamine resin is also applied to cotton, swabbing the barrel and chamber chambers of the gun to determine if the firearm was discharged. A deep blue color resulting from the reactions of nitrates with the resin indicates presence of gunpowder residue. The established forensic rules. First is the forensic chemist on case shall conduct the gunpowder residue examinations without delay. And the second is after examinations is done, the firearms shall be returned to the representative of the requesting unit if the request is solely for gunpowder residues or GPR examinations, or submitted to the FID if the ballistic examinations is required. The gunshot range or GSR determinations, also known as the gunshot distance determinations. When a firearm is discharged, gunpowder residues may also be deposited of the clothing of the victim. The size and density of the pattern of gunpowder residue found on the clothing are the main factors considered in determining approximate distance of the shooter to the victim. As the distance to victim increases, the size of pattern expands while density decreases and vice versa. Distance determinations. Distance determinations, the method of determining distance between the firearm and the target. This is usually based on the distance of the powder pattern or the spread of the shot pattern. These are the importance of distance determinations. First is in connection to self-defense place. And the second in the distinctions between murder and suicide. It is possible to state with certainty the distance of gun from the target by means of the pattern and residues left of the target. Not only the types of gun, but also the conditions and types of ammunitions that will affect this pattern. In ascertaining the gunshot range or GSR, the examination should note and observe the following. First is entrance, exit holes, and the second is powder residues pattern or burning, singing, smudging, tattooing, or a black coarsely prepared pattern. Age of the gun or efficiency of mechanisms are age of the gun efficiency of mechanism. Complete combustions of the conversions of all nitrates into the end products is more likely to occur in a new weapon compared to an old one. Besides, leakage of gunpowder is more likely to happen in the old weapon, where the breech mechanism is no longer tightly filled. Directions of firing. More powder residues will be obtained when the gun is fired upward than downward. Gunpowder residue have weight and will naturally fall down because of gravity. Wind directions and velocity. In high velocity, the powder residues will be blown in the directions of the wind. One is more likely to be positives of the gunpowder nitrates if there is no wind or the direction is away from the body. Humidity or percentage moistures in air. Humidity lessens to extends combustion's yielding of gunpowder nitrates. Humidity percentage moistures in air. Humidity lessens the extent of combustion's yielding more gunpowder nitrates. Powder tattooing. Powder tattooing produces black, coarsely half-papered pattern. Individuals peaks of tattooing around the hole and visible by the naked eye. The area of blackening around the perforations will be found to diminish in size as the muzzle of the gun is held further away from the target. Take note that the size of the area of powder tattooing will also depend on the following. Caliber. The following are caliber, powder charge, distance of firing. Individual peaks of tattooing around the hole are visible to the naked eye. The area of blackening around the perforations will be found to diminish in size as the muzzle of the gun is held further and at the distance of 8 inches. Blackening around the hole will completely disappear. A few individual peaks of tattooing will be visible to the naked eye. Wounds inflicted at a distance of more than 36 inches are powder tattooing is seldom present. And the nitrates found will not be sufficient for GSR. Bullet comparison. A type of examinations using a microscope which is commonly used in the comparisons of an empty shell containing characteristics marks from groove of the gun barrel and firing of the specific firearm used. That is the bullet comparison. Other methods of examination. To determine whether the victim was holding the firearm. One method used is by spraying the hands of the victims with ferrozine spray and to determine presence of iron traces. Hydroxyquinoline test as fluorescent photography can also be used. A suicide victim's hands are stained with orange brown color upon contact with gun barrels. The following death, presumably from perspirations with prolonged post-mortem interval of attack. Latent fingerprints can be detected in cartridge and spindle seal casting. It is latent because the substance from perspirations mixed with oils from sebaceous glands and transferred via substances of the skin reads to an object. Increase of temperatures and low humidity decrease persistence of the fingerprints. Brass retains fingerprints of the nickel-related materials. Firearm examinations. Methods used to determine the probable time the firearm has been discharged. These are Lucas test. A characteristic smell that decreases in intensity with lapse of time is present immediately after firing. But even after several weeks, some slight smell remains. Second is odor or hydrogen sulfide. This is another product resulting from combustion of gunpowder which is present in the gaseous state. This compound can be detected by means of lead acetate ether test. If the breech of the gun is kept closed, this persists between 2 to 3 hours. Sulfide. The greater part disappears in about 4 to 5 hours, but frequently a trace remains for a longer time, the longest period being 10 hours. The last, the third is the odor of the barrel or rusting. As a rule, no rust can be detected inside the barrel of firearm. If such firearm has not been discharged, but if the firearm has been discharged, iron salts are formed and can be detected inside the barrel. These iron salts are soon iodized, resulting in the formation of rust. The formation of rust is affected by humidity of the air, so that in the interpretations of the result, this factor must always be considered. The presence nitrates. The fourth is the presence of nitrates or by cotton swabbing method. Nitrates diminish after lapse of time. Nitrates can be detected by swabbing a portions of residues in a barrel and mixing the residue with the phenylamine solution or DPA. Fifth is the dermal nitrate test. This test is designed to determine the presence of gunpowder nitrates on the hands of the alleged shooter. Distance from which the gun has been discharged. Significance are in connections with self-defense. The second in the distinctions between murder and suicide. It can be stated with certainty the distance of the gun from the target by way of pattern of residues left on the victim. The other methods of examinations. The following are sophisticated instruments used to determine the gunshot range residues or GSR are the following: AAS, which is atomic observations spectrophotometer, and the second is NAA, neutron activation analysis. NAA is the neutron activation analysis. SAMEDX, scanning electron microscope with energy dispersive X-ray analysis. ICP-MS, inductively coupled plasma with mass spectrophotometry. The collections, preservations, and transits of specimen. The important points to remember in the collections, preservations, and transits of specimen. First is clothing removed from the victim should be cautiously and carefully handled to prevent powder residue from becoming dislodged. The second is, do not wad the specimen of or pack it loosely for shipment, and secure the area to be tested between 2 layers of heavy cardboard fastened together tightly to prevent the specimen from becoming post past fast flood about the transit. And its specimen should be wrapped tightly and marked, and coating heavily smeared with lead should be dried thoroughly before packing. And gun recovered from the scene of the crime and the ammunition available should be preserved. And then persons suspected to have discharged a firearm should be subjected to a paraffin test. Examinations must be performed immediately, and no case should it be postponed on 72 hours after the shooting. Explosive and explosion. What is explosive? Define. Explosive is any substances that may cause explosions by its sudden decompositions of combustions. It is any chemical compound or mixtures that under the influence or heat, pressures, frictions, or shocks undergoes a sudden chemical change of or decomposition. The classifications of explosives. According to the velocity of the reactions involved, the speed of the reactions of detonations of the explosive determines the classified of explosives as a low, primary initiating, and high explosive. Low explosives. Low explosives. These are low burning and used mainly as propellants like black and smokeless powder. The rate of decomposition is a relatively slow process, and the wave produced is less than the speed of sound. These are used for launching rockets, projectiles from guns and missile systems. Classes of low explosives are primer, igniter, propellant. Primer. At the other end of the delay is the primer and explosive, or generally lead acids mercury propellant. Igniter. The second is igniter, black or gunpowder. Igniter in gun propellants and safety. Blasting fuses delay fuse signal, and stress rockets and in firecrackers are used in mining and low power explosive. The compositions are potassium nitrates or KN plus charcoal and plus sulfur. Sodium nitrate. Second is sodium nitrate, charcoal, sulfur, and third is sulfurless black powders plus charcoal, and the fourth is pyrodex plus potassium perchlorate, and the last is charcoal plus sulfur and cyanide. Propellants. Propellants are used in launching projectiles from guns, rockets, and missile systems. It is a mixture of one or more energetic materials. Plasticizer to improve procedurally characteristics. Stabilizers to increase storage life, and inorganic additives of facilitate handling. Ignitability of decreased muzzle mass. The kinds of propellants are smokeless powder. Smokeless powders, the most widely used propellants, is based on the nitrocellulose or NC. Single base contains salt or NC, while the double base contains nitroglycerin or NZ. In addition to NZ, the triple base contains NZ plus NC plus nitroguanidine. The single base